The Sydney to Hobart is one of the world's great ocean races. Every year, the day after Christmas, yachts from around the world gather in Sydney Harbour for the annual pilgrimage south to Tasmania. In 1998, it was to start like any other year. Clear blue skies and a light nor'easterly breeze. The crews were told to expect some rough conditions ahead, but no one could ever have imagined the tragedy that was about to unfold. Of the 115 yachts that set sail, only 43 would finish the race. This Sydney to Hobart race would go down in the record books as the greatest single disaster in Australian maritime history. This is the story of those sailors who braved the elements and lived to tell their tale.
There is a gale warning for all Tasmanian coastal waters. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Here is Winston Churchill, Winston Churchill. We are getting the life rafts on deck. I'm glad to be alive, mate, I'll tell you.
On Boxing Day, December the 26th, Sydney Harbour is the focal point for one of Australia's most spectacular sporting events, the start of the 1,000-kilometre Sydney to Hobart yacht race.
The Sydney to Hobart began in 1954, with just 9 yachts making that first journey to Tasmania. It was to be the beginning of many races marred by ferocious storms and gale-force winds. All agreed it would have been far easier sailing north into calmer waters. But the decision to challenge some of the world's most dangerous oceans and head south toward Antarctica had much to do with the Australian way of life, its sense of ruggedness, its spirit of adventure. In the years ahead, more than 4,000 yachts would complete the race, with 35,000 crew braving the elements. The Sydney to Hobart is now internationally recognised as the world's toughest ocean-going race. Just making it to Hobart has become a feat in itself.
The start's good fun, the finish is good fun, and the whole rest of it is just an absolute nightmare. It's probably like the worst date you'll ever have in your life, you know. I do it because I'm professional, that's how I make a living. And why people do it for fun, I've got no idea.
There's only one reason for doing it, and that's because it's renowned to be the toughest race in the world, and it is. It's the hardest. It is definitely the physically most demanding race to do. The conditions are, there's guaranteed to be tough conditions every year. The year that it's a smooth sail south will be 1 in 100, and I don't think I'll ever get to see it.
The Sydney to Hobart has a reputation around the world as the place or the race you do to get the crap beaten out of you.
Yet, despite the danger, the race continues to gain in popularity. Remarkably, over more than half a century, only 2 people had lost their lives during the race. That was until 1998. Our story begins on Sydney Harbour on the afternoon of the 27th of December 1998, with 115 yachts preparing to set sail for Hobart.
Got a dip here, got a dip, line down, line down, line down! Hold line, hold the line. Got him there. Rick, come away a little, line down, line down, line down.
The feeling on the start of a Sydney to Hobart is always the most exciting point of the race. You have guys that have never sailed this sort of race before. We had one guy on board, 82 years old, competing in his first Sydney to Hobart, Papa Tom. He was looking forward to it. The buzz of the helicopters overhead, there's a massive crowd around you. There's thousands of spectator boats. A perfect Sydney summer's day. You're in shorts and t-shirt looking forward. This is what you've been building up for all year, and here's the start.
Apart from the excitement, a lot of caution and choosing a line to take out of the harbour to avoid running into another yacht or into even part of the spectator fleet.
It wasn't long before the race had its first drama. Just moments before the starting gun, there was a collision between Maxi Ketch Nokia and Sword of Orion. Protest flags went up immediately. But the race continued. It would take more than a minor collision to stop these sailors in their quest for Hobart.
As you come up to that start, the emotion wells, the 10-minute gun goes, everyone starts to hover around, the 5-minute gun goes, it's getting closer, the countdown from 3 minutes is unbelievable, the helicopters come in, the boats gather together, and you're just waiting for that final gun, and when that gun goes, it's like a charge to the heads, it's like the Melbourne Cup 10 times. You just cannot describe how the adrenaline going through your body, boats side by side, and you're beating them. You only want to beat them to the heads, let alone to Hobart.
As the fleet rounded the heads out of Sydney Harbour, US yacht Sayonara showed why she's regarded as the world's leading maxi, as she quickly shot to the lead, with Australian favourite Brindabella in close pursuit, followed by Wild Thing.
The forecast is for fairly light to moderate northeasterly winds down the coast, around the 15 to 20 knot mark, but the boats will reach Bass Strait, or when the boats reach Bass Strait, they'll encounter a change, a very strong change from the west or southwest, and winds will be up around the 40 knot mark with that change.
The conditions were ideal for Nokia. The biggest boat in the fleet was rapidly making up lost time after the collision at the start of the race.
We've now got the spinnaker up, staysail up, mainsail, mizzen staysail, and also the mizzen main. So we've got plenty of sail up, beautiful breeze coming over the left-hand side of the boat here, and we're now heading for Hobart.
Now we're travelling with a very good speed, all 5 sails up, and we're certainly catching up the leading boat shortly. So I think the spirit on the boat is good, and we keep going full speed.
The race would take the fleet down the east coast of Australia, 630 nautical miles south from Sydney, across Bass Strait and into Hobart. On average, a 3-day sail.
At that stage, we were just trying to really enjoy ourselves and get the most out of it, enjoying a bit of sun, enjoying the breeze from behind. We were working the boat pretty hard. Craig was steering, and he was snaking his way down the waves, as he does. Pretty nice.
Despite the relative calm, the crews knew it wouldn't last, and a storm was starting to build further south.
Warning. There is a storm warning current from Marimba.
We've just received the latest computer model guidance, which came out around 1 o'clock this afternoon, and it does show that the low will be very intense and will develop in Bass Strait. And it looks like now winds are going to be up around the 45 to 55 knot mark, and a storm warning forecast has been issued for winds of that strength.
But no one, not even the Weather Bureau, knew just how intense that low-pressure system would become.
Now we're getting into the preparations for this storm front to come through. The grinders are working pretty hard here next to us, but in particular we do have Lisa going up the rig in order to change some of the sail setup we've got here. She's looking at putting in a reef line. I believe that's what she's up to get ready to drop some of that sail down. It can be brought down about a third of its size, or almost a half of its size, in order to take some of the pressures out of the rig when the breeze really starts to kick in. How do you think the Nokia will handle these conditions up against the rest of the fleet?
She's a very strong boat. She was built for the round the world race. In that race they have to sail in adverse conditions, mainly this sort of sailing downwind, but they do get adverse conditions sailing upwind around Cape Horn, etc. The boat was built for those conditions. We believe she'll hold together well for us.
The crews could be excused for an air of complacency. After all, the last 5 Sydney to Hobart races had started with similar storm warnings.
It was an unusual looking storm front. Normally the storm front comes in as just a single line across the horizon. In this case we could see 2 fronts, and we could see a very sharp clear gap in between, and massive electrical storms, and the speed at which these storms were coming on, I've certainly never witnessed storms at sea come in so quickly.
Someone organise the other chute. Somebody on the brake.
We could feel the air change. There was a temperature change, the density of the air changes, and so we really knew it was coming on. We got our sail down nice and early, and the wind speed just kept on picking up.
The first to hit the storm were the Maxis, the yachts best equipped to handle the heavy conditions. The smaller yachts were now scattered over a 40-kilometre area.
Bateman's Bay, Coastal Patrol, here is Delta Control, go.
Delta Control, Bateman's Bay Coast Patrol, just to inform you, the yacht ABN AMRO is under tow and heading for Bateman's Bay.
Early morning on day 2. The storm had begun to take its toll.
We just heard this really loud bang, and the boat spun out of control, so there's half a chance we'd hit a sunfish or some debris in the water, and the rudder sheared off at the deck, and from then on it was hanging on tight as the boat broached wildly and threw a lot of the crew down into the leeward side rail, and then we started to take in water where the rudder had sheared off, so for a while there we're in dire straits.
6 yachts had been forced to retire after suffering hull and rigging damage, a sure sign of things to come.
Well, they look like they're coming towards us. You guys all right?
We decided, like there's only one, you've got one life, but you've got plenty of Hobart races to go. We decided it was a wise thing to retire gracefully early before it was too late.
It's about 30 knots, 35 knots, I guess. The boat's gone through. We've got another boat down to leeward of us, so it gives us a measure of how we're going, which is quite nice when you can't see anything else. And I guess this is the sort of weather Salandra really likes, so hopefully it'll get us closer to Hobart a bit quicker than some of the other boats.
We were going to be in for a good day that day, and we decided to get a bit of food into our bellies in the morning, passed out a few bananas, and I think for a lot of the crew that was the last thing we ate before the storm.
By midday on day 2, conditions were rapidly deteriorating. The extreme low was no longer a prediction. It had now become a harsh reality.
Intense and awesomely frightening. Gusting occasionally as far as 85 knots. You'd have a sea pattern of about sort of 12 to 14 foot seas, and then all of a sudden a whole set of 30 and 40 foot waves had come through.
There is a gale warning for eastern Victorian area. There is also a gale warning for all Tasmanian coastal waters.
It was a low pressure system which formed around a front. The actual dynamics of the storm were quite complex. It was related to the jet stream and a whole lot of cold air coming up through southern Victoria and caused a rapid intensification of the system.
Despite the warnings, many crews decided to continue the race, thinking it was safer to ride out the storm rather than turn and run from it.
It hardly seems we've only been sailing about 24 hours. It seems like 24 days. We are a bit cold and wet, and we're just waiting to get to Hobart. But no, to all the family, we are all well.
The race organisers were saying to us, you proceed at your own risk to each other, and yeah, that was a pretty heavy situation, because we had to make our minds up. So that's when we decided that we were going to still press on, because we were far enough south to make it marginal for us to turn back, and we thought at the time that it would have been no better to head north in those conditions, and in fact we thought it might have even been worse.
It was a critical decision. In many cases, a life or death decision.
We were on the biggest boat in the fleet, and at times you're 5 metres clear of the water and the waves are still 4 metres over your head, rolling, throwing you across the deck, smashing the lifelines. I saw people picked up and hurled into parts of the boat, badly injuring themselves.
First concern was that everybody was safe on board the yacht. Second concern was to look after the yacht as much as possible. And our last concern was to worry about racing.
We were just getting rolled time after time, and that was really unsettling for the crew down below, and it was dangerous for the crew on top. When we were getting rolled, we were getting fully rolled and the boat was virtually submerged, and so you'd come up out of the water and just feel like a submarine, and there'd be bodies, people flailing everywhere trying to get back to their feet and, you know, trying to get ready to sail the boat again.
As fate would have it, the storm and the race converged in the most dangerous place possible, Bass Strait, a cold, remote area with highly unpredictable weather patterns.
Well, Bass Strait's notorious for strong storms, and a lot of it's related to the shape of the ocean bottom, the ocean currents. They all combine together to make a storm particularly ferocious, especially eastern Bass Strait. But this storm would have been one that you'd only see once every 5 or 10 years.
By early afternoon, the crews were experiencing extreme conditions similar to a cyclone. The Sydney to Hobart had gone from a yacht race to a race for survival.
Conditions that you just, beyond imagination. So you're talking about 7 or 8 hours of just the most awesomely frightening sailing conditions.
And you can't hear anything. All the boys are going hoarse because they're yelling. You know, you can't hear anything. You've got your hood up, you've probably got a hat on underneath it. The poor old Helmy, man, he's sitting there just getting pasted. And all the boys are curled up on the rail. This sucks, you know. The physics are enormous, and you don't even notice the amount of energy you expend just doing little things. Even just hanging onto a stanchion, sitting on the rail like that, you've got a fully embraced arm, and you're hanging on like anything. Your ribs and your abs and your legs and your bum and everything are all like gripping on, you know, and it's very physical.
ABC helicopter, this is Sienna. I will inquire over.
From the maritime safety, they're wondering if you feel able to hold in the area of the stand aside here in case persons need to take into a life raft or abandon the ship, abandon the boat prior to the rescue. Over.
ABC helicopter, this is Sienna. I will inquire. However, we are not that manoeuvrable. We're under very small sails. The sea is very rough down here, although we do have our engine on. I'll be back to you in a moment. Over.
ABC chopper, roger, waiting, and ABC chopper to stand aside, over. Roger, we confirm that we have within 30 minutes one rescue chopper, quickly followed by another, over.
The yacht stand aside was the first boat to strike real trouble. With its mast gone and taking on water, the 12 crew were at the mercy of the elements.
It was a very violent, fast, sharp roll that tumbled us down. Port bow dug in and the boat flipped over. And within seconds, fortunately, it righted itself, and we were definitely in survival mode at that stage.
On arrival, we were confronted with conditions were just what can be described as absolutely horrendous there. The seas were around 60 foot high. The winds were just 60, 70 knots, something which I've never confronted before. The helicopter was being buffeted around, and it was quite rough, very disconcerting.
The sound of the first helicopter was wonderful. That was probably a half to 3/4 an hour after we'd set off our distress signals. Not at this stage, of course, was rising and falling 50, 60, 70 feet at a time.
Once we got out onto the skid itself, and I was hit in the face by these winds, which is something I can only describe as ferocious, and the noise was just like a train. The helicopter puts out a lot of noise hovering anyway, but the wind itself was something different. Being hit in the face with the spray from the ocean at 80 feet high, and the waves were just absolutely frightening. One of our life rafts, we allowed that to float out to the back of the boat, and 2 people at a time floated out behind the yacht. And Peter Davison from Helimed 1 did a wonderful job coming down, swimming to us into the raft and lifting one person at a time up to the safety of the helicopter. They were just looking at me as if to say, well, you know, here I am, come and get me, and they were just totally exhausted. The hardest part was actually getting to the life raft itself. Once I was in the water, the helicopter moved back and let out as much cable as they possibly could. So I was dragging about 150 foot of cable, swimming to the life raft, and then physically climbing into the life raft was quite exhausting.
For 25 minutes, Davidson dragged 8 men to safety.
So I was the last one that Peter had taken up, so he was absolutely exhausted. I could see that in his face on our way up. So we swung in the door of the helicopter, and there wasn't a lot said. Everyone was so tired and exhausted. There was a lot of smiles, handshakes. Peter had the biggest grin on anyone's face you could ever imagine. We were packed in like a pile of sardines into a helicopter that normally takes a few less than what we had.
By the end of the day, another 50 sailors had been plucked from the seas, and the biggest maritime rescue operation in Australian history was in full swing.